everybody, welcome back to my English literature videos. So today we are going to talk again about the war poets. We started talking about this topic in my last video, and we said that war poets wrote during the period of the First World War, and their poetry was extremely modern. Okay, there were no conventions typical of the poetry of the 19th century. They actually, so the main topic in their poetry was war, and they wanted to talk about feelings, opinions, their state of mind, their direct experiences concerning war, about propaganda on one side or denounce on the other side. Why am I saying so? Well, we said last time that there were two completely different perspectives, two completely different ideas, two completely different groups of war poets. So on one side, poets who wanted to talk about war in a very lyric way, and they used a very romantic, a very soft language, and they believed that war was a way to clean the world by evil. And they believed in the heroic aspect of war, in glory and ideals of war, also connected with imperialism and Victorian imperialism, and also connected with heroic literature and classic literature, and so on and so on. So patriotism was extremely important in their poetry. I'm talking especially about Rupert Brooke, and we talked about him in my last video. We also analyzed one of his most famous works, his sonnet, The Soldier, in which he actually talks about this strong patriotism, and there is a very important rhetoric aspect, okay, while talking about this topic. Now, today, we're going to talk about the other group, okay, of war poets. Absolutely opposite, completely different. So they believed that war was synonym of horror, of a tragedy. They often talked about their own experiences in war, maybe in trenches, and they talked about the horrors of this experience. They use a very crude, realistic, and absolutely specific language in order to talk about suffering, especially physical suffering. And they denounce basically the false, they denounce propaganda and the false ideals that were emphasized by patriotism and propaganda. Especially one of these authors, and I'm talking about Wilfred Owen, is particularly well known for his strong denounce against war. Wilfred Owen was born in 1893, and in 1913 he went to France to teach, he went there as a teacher, and then in 1915 he came back and he joined the British Army. He became an infantry officer, and he experienced war, first person, and he was completely shocked by the horrors of the life in the trenches. He also met in a hospital in Scotland. He met Sigrid Sassoon. Sassoon was another war poet, and with his encouragement, his enthusiasm, his criticism too, he helped Owen to find his own dimension, okay, as a poet. In fact, we can say that basically Owen's poems were all written in 1917, and they were all published after his death, actually. In a preface to his work, he talked very clearly about the purpose that poetry should have, in his opinion, obviously. And I would like to share with you a couple of lines taken from this sort of a manifesto, because actually it became a manifesto, before reading his masterpiece, probably his most famous work and poem. We'll analyze it together, and the poem is Dulce et Decorum est. Let's see his line, okay, his preface before. It's very short but very meaningful in my opinion. He says, this book, and he's talking obviously about his poems, is not about heroes. So he already says no heroic, okay, perspectives here. English poetry is not yet fit to speak of them. Nor is it about legends or lands or anything about glory, honor, might, majesty, dominion, or power, except war. So he's already saying, okay, I am not going to talk about all the topics that belonged to the other group of the war poets, okay? For example, Brooke, he talked especially about these topics, all of them. And Owen says, no, no way. In my opinion, poetry shouldn't talk about that. Above all, I am not concerned with poetry, okay? So I'm not here to talk about poetry, to make poetry. My subject is war and the pity, okay, of war. So my main topic is war. I don't care about poetry or poetic or literature things or whatever. I want to talk about poetry and the pity of poetry. And then he says, the poetry is in the pity. Okay, so I talk about war. Obviously, I talk about the pity, okay, concerning war, in front of war, in war, and that is the poetic element, that pity. And again, he goes on and says, yet, these elegies are, to this generation, in no sense consolatory. So pay attention, I'm talking about the pity, but that pity shouldn't be considered, shouldn't be idealized. It shouldn't become sort of an ideal, like glory or immortality, okay? Those ideals that are used by propaganda, by the other group of war poets, not at all. It shouldn't be consolatory. I want to say the truth. There is no consolation in what I say. They may be to the next, okay, probably, okay. The next one we'll talk about that, not me. All a poet can do today is warn. This is absolutely important, okay, is warn. His poetry is a warning, okay. He is talking about, he's saying, be careful, pay attention, okay. Try not to be tricked by propaganda and so on and so on. So I'm warning you, I'm telling you what war is, okay, the truth. In fact, he says, that is why the true poets must be truthful. The true poets must be truthful. Okay, the two words are different, true and truthful. Okay, so the true poets, so real poets, okay, must be truthful. So must tell something that is based on truth. Okay, there must be truth in their words. This is absolutely important. And for this reason, he writes Dulce et Decorum est. It is obviously a Latin expression, and it means that it is sweet and appropriate, decent, respectful to die for the fatherland. Okay, this is a typical expression of propaganda, obviously, and the main purpose of his work here is to say this is a lie, don't believe that. Okay. So, this work was written in 1917, but it was first published in 1920. It's obviously based on his experience, his own experience in the trenches, and it is really, really hard to read. Every time I read that, every time I teach that, I got goosebumps, okay, and I shiver. It's really very, very powerful. Let's read it together. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. This is obviously a terrible scenario. Terrible scenarios of trenches. Well, real life, actually. He talks about himself and the other soldiers bent double, okay, like old beggars under sacks. So they were bent, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, so like witches. You can already see from these images that there is sort of a prefiguration of death. And he is obviously soldiers were young people, but they are represented as old people in this way. They are bent, okay, like old beggars, coughing like hags. Witches are normally also old, knock-kneed, so the knees are touching, okay, while walking, and it can be compared to the image of a skeleton, okay, so it's a sort of a prefiguration of death. We obviously talking about himself and his other soldiers, companions, cursed through sludge. Okay, they cursed. Obviously, the way they talked was terrible in this sludge, which is a sort of a thick mud. Okay. Till on the haunting flares we turned our backs. So when they heard basically they saw the bright lights exploded to illuminate the battlefield at night, okay, that's the meaning of haunting flares, we turned our backs. So we turned, and towards our distant rest began to trudge, and so they tried to get to the place they could actually be safe, okay. So to trudge means walk slowly and heavily, okay. Men marched asleep. They were fast asleep. They could look asleep because they were extremely tired, but also because they were almost dead, okay. They were like walking dead, okay. It's terrible. Many had lost their boots, so they lost their boots and limped on, but they still tried to continue to talk, okay, even with an uneven, okay, step, okay, because they were limping. Bloodshot, so their feet were covered in blood, because obviously they were wounded while walking without shoes, so their shoes were made of blood. All went lame, so they weren't the only. So people were lame, but the whole situation was lame. All blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf. So they are deaf, they are blind, they can't walk, they're almost dead. Okay, they're asleep. That's not a true sleep. Okay, that's the sleep of death. Drunk with fatigue, obviously were completely tired, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells. The hoots are the sounds, loud sounds, okay, of gas shells dropping softly behind them. And so he goes on like this. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. Now, obviously the shout of the guys who saw the gas shells dropping behind them. They were shouting, gas, gas, quick boys, okay, let's go away from here to a safe place. An ecstasy of forming, so basically they are moving their hands in a very awkward fashion, okay, to get the helmets in time, so before the explosion. But someone was yelling out and stumbling, so not everyone was able to get in time to the helmets, and so they were yelling and stumbling and floundering, which means they were moving with great difficulty, okay, like a man in fire or lime, which is terrible image, okay, like a man which was in fire and or in lime. In lime, it's lime is that white substance that provokes severe, very terrible burning. So they were burning alive, basically, and they were moving because they weren't able to free themselves from that suffering. And Owen and the other friends were watching them without being able to do anything. In fact, he's talking about himself here, his perspective, dim through the misty panes and thick green light. Okay, so he could watch through his glasses, okay, his glasses, the panes of, we can say the glass mask, basically, and through the green air that was provoked by the explosion, okay, by the gas, okay, of the explosion. Through that, he could see a dim image, okay, as if he was under the sea, underwater. Actually, they couldn't hear, they couldn't see, they couldn't breathe. They felt exactly as if they were underwater, a green water, the water of a sea. And he saw his friend, in the suggestion, he saw his friend drowning, okay, suffocating, because he obviously wasn't able to breathe. He couldn't find air. Okay, so there is this metaphor, okay, because they felt themselves like as if they were underwater, because it wasn't an environment where they could survive. They didn't have air, oxygen. They couldn't move. They couldn't see. They couldn't hear. They couldn't walk. So they couldn't move for this reason. Okay, so he feels underwater and he sees his friend drowning, but actually wasn't drowning underwater because of the water, but he was drowning in the air, okay, but the air was full of gas. And then there is this couplet, okay, this couplet which emphasizes his experience, okay, and how this experience has affected him and will never cease to affect him. He says, in all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. So this is something that's persecuted him, something that chases him, okay, and he can't get rid of this image, even in his dreams, in his nightmares today. He can see this man. He's obviously the friend who's dead, which is a symbol, okay, of soldiers who die. That plunges at me, guttering, okay, guttering means flickering, okay, like a sort of a candle about to go out. Choking, okay, because as we said before, he was suffocating, drowning again, so the image, the metaphor of the water goes on. And then he changes perspective here, and till this point he has talked about, he was the witness of what happened, and he was actually explaining, telling what happened. But now something changes in the poem, and Owen talks to the reader, to all of us, to all of you, okay? And he looks for empathy. He looks for help. Help to do what? Help to understand help to see the truth, help to destroy the old lie of propaganda. And he says, if in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil's sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come guggling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, Dulce decorum est, pro patria mori. Well, now he is really asking for help, okay? He's asking for awareness. He says, if you reader, you may have sometimes some nightmares, which are quite common actually, in which you feel like you're suffocating, like you're drowning. This is something that can actually help. It's quite recurring nightmare for everyone, I think. Well, if in one of those nightmares you too could pace, so together with me, with the others, could walk, okay, behind the wagon on which we put that dying friend, okay, so him is the friend who is dying because of the gas, and watch the white eyes writhing, and watch his eyes, which are not human anymore. They are twisting around because he's in great pain, because he is poisoned, okay, so they are twisting. This is why they are white, okay. In his face, his hanging face, like a devil sick of sin. So there is this image in which he seems to be victim of some kind of possession, okay. But the devil, the possession, the evil, okay, is the war, okay, the devil who has caught his friend. If you could hear, you reader, in your nightmare, if you could walk with us after the wagon and could hear at every jolt, so at every movement, sudden movement of the wagon, basically, the blood that comes out, okay, from my friends, from the other soldiers' lungs, which are corrupted, which are ruined because of the froth. Froth is the foam due to the poison, okay, to the gas. Obscene as cancer, terrible as cancer. Bitter as the cud, okay. The cud is that substance that you keep in your mouth, in your mouth while chewing, and it is also that substance that is created by the acid substances in your stomach. So there is a sort of we can say throwing up, okay, those things that this guy had to swallow, okay, the horrors, the poison of words, the poison of propaganda who took him there. And so this card creates, because of this substance, this incurable sores, wounds, okay, on innocent tongues, okay, innocent tongues, because these guys are innocent, okay. When they talk about war, they believe in what they say, okay, because they are victim of the eternal lie of propaganda, obviously. My friend, you reader, you, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest, with such an enthusiasm, okay, to children, to young guys who are really looking for glory, for success, for immortality. You won't tell them that old lie. you may notice here that lie is written with a capital letter because this is the lie, okay? The ultimate lie. And that lie is the lie of propaganda. So dulce decorum est, pro patria, mori. So it's sweet, it's appropriate, it's decent, it's respectful, it's glorious to die for your country, for your fatherland, for your motherland. So this is obviously I didn't mention it before. This is a quotation from Horace. Okay, this is obviously Latin. Okay, and from Horace's Odes. Okay, this is obviously a quotation from the classic. We can easily understand here what I meant when I said that the two poems that we have analyzed, so this one and the soldier, so Owen's poem, okay, in my last video, they're completely opposite, okay, they're completely different, and there is a completely different perspective. We can also say that a huge difference between Brooke and Owen is that Brooke didn't have the chance, as I said in my last video, I already said that he didn't have the chance to question his ideals because he, unfortunately, he died before actually experiencing what war was, okay? And there was nothing poetic or romantic or heroic in war, but it's just tragic and horrible. Owen did. He did experience life in the trenches, he saw the horrors and suffering, and there is nothing so decent and sweet and romantic in dying, okay, in a horrible way. I believe that his message is quite modern and interesting today as well. We may change the way to fight in war sometimes we don't, but the concept, I mean, the idea is always the same. So this is what literature is for. It's not just there for us to enjoy rhymes or verses, or we also like to enjoy verses and lines and whatever, but it's also important to get the meaning and to understand the warnings and to make them a part of our lives, and to be that reader, okay, that reader Owen talked to, okay. We want to be that reader and to be aware of what he said. Well, I hope that I helped you and that you have found this video quite useful or quite interesting. If you did, I ask you to like this video, so thumbs up, and please subscribe my channel if you like it, if you like what I do. Share my videos if you believe that someone else could be interested, and I thank you for watching, thank you for your open minds and your open hearts, and for your support, which is incredibly important to me. Thank you so very much, and see you soon. Bye.